Hi. In today's episode, we have Jazz Dosanjh. Jazz is a writer, an author, and an entrepreneur. She's written a series of memoirs called Life Out of Reach, and her first two books, Spare Burden and Not the Property Of, are already out on Amazon, so you can check out her work. Her memoir focuses on her upbringing as a child of immigrants and being the second eldest daughter in a family of 7 children. But what's most interesting for us is Jazz is focused on bringing women to the driver's seat in their life. Now, what got me very interested was that Jazz would tell us the challenges that she's faced being an immigrant child and, on gender, because India became the most common country of origin for migrants in the UK after a number of Poles left the UK. So, in fact, when I did a study, it's estimated that 14% of UK's population, or 9.5 million people, are immigrants from India mostly. So welcome, Jazz, on today's episode of our podcast, and tell us the start of your journey, Jazz.
Thank you so much. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. The start of my journey, I guess it's, I'm a child of immigrants. My parents came over in the 1960s, and I'm one of 7 I'm one of 7 children. My parents carried on having children until they got a boy. So growing up, you get the sense that you're very unwanted as a girl, and also you're a burden. And you're a burden because you're made aware from a very early age that your parents came to this country. They came with nothing. They're struggling. They're poor. And you've added to their burden by being born as a girl. So in my family, money was discussed openly, or the lack of money was discussed openly. So you do get that sense of, even as a young child, of being responsible, of not becoming more of a burden than what you already are to your parents. So that's kind of how my journey started, with that realization that you're living in England, your parents are from India, and you are born in the UK, you're raised as a British citizen, but at home you have an Indian life, and at school you have a British life, an English life. So you're kind of caught between those two cultures, and that's how it was as I was growing up.
That must have been so, it's so difficult because you're forever navigating between one identity and the other. Because I would assume that, me having been, I'm a Bengali, and again, we are also very, very, with this whole culture, you're forced to learn music, which is very interesting also. But, because I was raised in Delhi, I think my parents forced me to be very, very Bengali. And what happened was I started rebelling because, when I went out, there was a very dual, there was another identity of being a Delhiite. I mean, and I can't even imagine what it must be like for you in England, and to be an Indian back at home with all our, with all the traditional things that we have. And it's like a trap, isn't it, Jess?
I think for me, for me and my sisters growing up, it's different because we were Indian, and then you go outside and it's white people. So we weren't faced with there's more Indian people outside on the streets. It wasn't like that for us. It was, we step outside of our house and we step into a very white world. We step into the English world. And at school, that's how we were. So you did have two like personas. So you had like the life that you had at school, and then you had the life that you have at home. And I talk about it in the first book, Spare Burden, where I discuss that your life is very separate. Your school life starts at the school gate and ends at the school gate at 4:00 when you leave school. And then your home life starts. And we weren't allowed to go to parties or go meet our friends after school. We weren't allowed to go on overnight trips anywhere. And this was not just me and my sisters. This was the norm for all of the brown Indian people in my school. None of us were allowed to do any of the things that the white girls were doing. We weren't allowed to talk to boys. Didn't matter if they were Indian boys, white boys. We weren't allowed to talk to boys. We weren't allowed to go out after school, hang around in a gang. It was none of that. It was like my parents wanted us to be educated, but they didn't want us to have the social side of it, what school provides. They didn't want that. They just wanted us to go into school, be taught, have an education, and then come back home and be Indian. And we were very Indian. We were completely, we were very hardworking. We'd help our parents around the house. We never answered back. You know how these white white children have arguments with their parents, and they slam the door, go into their bedroom. We never did any of that, any of us, ever.
How did it pan out for you, Jazz, as a person? I mean, how did you? Because it must have been such a different world that you had, like you said, during those hours in school, and then coming back into an environment that you're, which is so alien from, and because we spend majority of our hours outside, in your education system, right? Because when you come back
Yeah.
home, you've had your dinner, you've helped around, and then you go into bed. So, how did you, navigate this whole thing?
I think you learn to separate yourself. So you carb I can't even pronounce the word. It's compartmentalize. You put things
Compartmentalize, yeah.
into boxes.
Right.
So you have your school life, your Indian life, and then you have, there's a slight overlap. And I was quite lucky in that my parents, although I had a forced marriage, when I was growing up, my parents wouldn't stop us watching Western TV. They didn't stop us dancing to Bhangra because me and my sisters loved dancing. There was, they embraced English food, not all of it, some of it. Whereas some of my relatives, they completely turned their back on everything that was to do with the English culture, which made their children's lives very difficult. But I think to cope with something like that, you have to separate things into boxes and understand that school life is school life, and that is where you are allowed to be a child. And you can see the differences even as a very young child in junior school. You can see the differences between the way that I would behave and other Indian children would behave to how the white girls would behave. And then you have your Indian life, which starts as soon as you start the walk home from school.
Wow. So is there any incident that you remember that really stayed back with you when you said, when in the behavior? Because I relate to this.
I think there's a lot of times. It's I remember one incident in particular. I was about to walk out of school with one of my white friends, and an Indian boy. I wasn't allowed to talk to boys. An Indian boy came to talk to my white friend, and he walked alongside her, and I was getting more and more worried as we were coming up to the road, the main road where anyone could see us, right? And that one day, both of my parents were in my dad's car parked right outside of the school. And it was so profound that I actually wrote a complete chapter on it, because I was the one that got told off because this boy was talking to my white friend, but he just happened to be walking with us.
Oh, Lord.
And I got told off for that. So that's how strict, in a way, my parents were. They just didn't. I think because they came to a new country, and it's not just my parents. I think it was a lot of children who have gone through this. The first generation children are born to immigrants. We've all suffered because our parents came to a strange country. They clustered into one area because I can understand that when you come to a foreign country where you're not always welcomed, you seek out other people that are similar to you.
Yes, you seek familiarity.
Yeah, it's familiarity, and you have comfort in that, so that's fine. But they wanted to create a kind of like a little India in each community, in each street, in each home. They wanted to hang on to India as much as they could. And I completely understand that. As an adult now myself, I have two children. So what I say to my children, I have a daughter and I have a son. What I say to my children is, you have been lucky enough to be born into two cultures. You take the good things out of each culture. The Indian culture has good things, and the English culture has good things, but they both have bad things as well. Just leave the bad things, take the good things out of both cultures, and use those in your life. That's how you live your life. So, in a way, I think I'm really quite lucky now, really quite fortunate. As a younger child, it was, you knew that you had a disadvantage. You were aware of it because your parents didn't accept and didn't embrace completely, everything that this country had to offer. You were restricted. As an Indian girl, you were restricted from going out. We weren't even allowed to go to the library by ourselves. And you tell this to your white friends, and they're just like, "What?" They have no understanding of it. They're just completely shocked.
Yes, they don't understand this concept at all.
Yeah,
Absolutely, they don't. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how was it different for you, Jazz, as a parent? What is it that you were very conscious about for both your growing children?
I think I just wanted them to have freedom, which is something that I never had. Just the freedom to dream, just the freedom to say, this is what I want to do in life, the freedom to have sleepovers, the freedom to go on trips to school, so that, when a child is being educated, and I was very fortunate, both of my children have been privately educated, so they've gone to some of the best schools in the country. And the schools offer extracurricular activities. They offer so much more, after school clubs, all of that. And it's actually embracing that for your children and saying, yes, school is for education, but actually there's also this other element of school, which is the social bit, which is where you start to become individual, where you embrace more and more freedom.
Well, you learn so much about yourself in interpersonal relationships with different cultures,
Yeah, because school isn't just about sitting behind a desk and
absolutely,
having the teacher talk to you. It's about so many other things. It's about becoming a social person, learning to interact with lots of different cultures. My son goes to a school that is an international IB school, so I think they have 120 different children. They have culturally, they have 120 cultures, different cultures in the school, because they have people from all over. They have children from all over the world in that school, because it is an international school.
So, Jess, I also want you to talk to the listeners about how you are really working towards helping women cope up with their divorce, and how people can have really a good life after they're divorced. Because I think sitting here in India, we're still struggling with the whole ostracism of being single, of of a marriage breaking down, or just things that probably you do not have control over in your own life, but these incidents happen, and then you just constantly beat yourself down, which I think many women all across the world that they do. So just tell us a little bit about your life journey. I mean, what prompted you to get into this whole space of working towards women, who post-divorce should actually really live up their life instead of feeling guilty all the time?
Divorce is difficult. It's a very difficult subject. It's a difficult thing to go through. And I think for me, the way I got into this space was that I've had 2 divorces. I divorced both of my husbands for different reasons. I just did not want to be married to them anymore. And I didn't really think beyond the ending of that relationship. For me, the main focus was to end the relationship. And it's only afterwards, when you are actually divorced, and then the impact of that on your children, on yourself, on your psyche, the actual process of going through the divorce.
Yeah, it's very difficult.
It's very, very difficult. I spent £4,500 on my first divorce. On my second divorce, I spent £270,000. That's over $250,000 getting just on the divorce, just getting divorced. So I realized that through that, I had gained a lot of knowledge about what not to do, because I actually ended up suing my divorce lawyers in the High Court in London, and they gave me an out-of-court settlement. So I have had so much experience now in courtrooms. And then I realized that women at the school gates were coming to me, asking me about divorce, wanting advice. So that's how I kind of got into this, giving advice to women. And that's how I decided, actually, I'm going to turn this into a proper program. I'm going to turn it into a proper business so that I can help more women by placing it online so it becomes accessible to everyone. But then you go to, so that's like the practical side of getting divorced, the actual, the process of it. But then you have the emotional, the mental toil, and it is a toil. However dark your days and nights are when you're going through the divorce, when you come out on the other side, the realization that you can actually close your front door and there's going to be nobody coming in to start an argument, to tell you a lie, smelling of another woman's perfume or whatever it is, when you close that front door and you have that silence and it's just you and your children and they're tucked up warm in bed and there's just quiet, the serenity, nothing, no matter how hard the battle, there's nothing that can compare with that feeling of peace. And whatever the world, whatever your relatives, your friends might say about you, might gossip about you, oh, she's failed at 2 marriages, all of that, you have friends that won't want to see you again for whatever reason. There's all sorts of, divorce. It doesn't leave any of your relationships the same once you've gone through a divorce, with your friendships, even with your work colleagues, with your parents, with your family, with your relatives, with your ex in-laws. Every relationship will change, including the one that you have with your children.
Why do you say that, Jess?
Because I've been there.
Your first marriage was an arranged marriage, right?
It was a forced marriage.
What do you mean when you say forced marriage? And you were very young. I mean, so you must tell our listeners about this because there's so many immigrant children and also in India, even today, that we do not even have, because this whole conditioning, the social pressure that we have of age that's boxed, your biological age, by the time you need to have children, by the time you're desirable and you are, you look fertile, and that's when you need to get married and start a home. So it'll, it's really sad because, and of course, as immigrant children, that the pressure is even more higher because I guess the society is even more closely knit. So tell me about the first, your forced marriage, which I want to know about.
Okay, so that one, my dad's sister was married to his mom's brother. So my buwa was married to his mama. So I knew of the family growing up, but then when I was about 6, they moved to Vancouver. So he was born here. So that he moved to Vancouver. When I was 16, I went to a religious ceremony at my aunt's house, and he was there. He'd come back with his mom to have visit his father, who still lived in this country, and visit other relatives. So he'd come over just for the summer. He was 15, I was 16. I just finished my GCSEs. I was looking forward to having a beautiful summer off, no studying, nothing, just sunny, glorious days in front of me. And he saw me, and within a few minutes, he had decided he wanted to marry me. So he'd gone and told his mother, and his mother had turned around and she'd started laughing because he'd said to her, "Can you get her for me?" And she had turned around and said to him, "I don't need to get her. She's already yours." And it was then that so I didn't pay much attention to what was going on. And then I was at school, I think it was a month later, I was at school. I came back and the whole house was full of relatives. And basically I was made to go into the living room, and that he was sitting on a chair and there was an empty chair next to him. Now, we both know when there's 2 chairs placed and there's an empty chair next to a guy that's sitting there, who's supposed to sit on that chair. It's going to be whoever is his, wife to be. And I was actually forced to sit on that chair. I did not want to sit on that chair. At 16, I was 16. God. And then it later came out that my parents, because the families already knew each other, I was 6 months old and his mother had been pregnant with him. And she had said that if she has a boy, she will get him engaged, married to me. And the families had laughed, and but then she'd had a boy, and then the promise had been made. I didn't know about this, and he didn't know about this. So then, when 16 years later, he came back for his summer holiday with his mom back from Vancouver, he came back to the UK, and he saw me sitting in the garden of my aunt's house, and he immediately decided he wanted to marry me. Everyone thought it was meant to be. So I didn't know about the promise. He didn't know about the promise. And that, he was just besotted. I did, after a year and a half, call him to my school. And I said, I do not want to marry you. I just told him straight. And he had gone home and tried to slash his wrist. And I had gotten into trouble for it. And I was told that it doesn't matter what you told him at school, what you said to him. What we've decided is what you're going to do. So you have a choice. You have a choice then. Do you walk out of the front door into a world that you do not know, into a very white world that you have not been allowed to explore as you've grown up? You have no idea what's on the other side of that front door. Or do you, for the sake of your family and keeping your sisters, do you stay and do you marry the person that you're now being forced to marry? So I made the mistake of staying and marrying the guy. Big mistake. Huge mistake.
Why do you say it was a mistake? I mean,
it was a mistake
course,
because
he slashed his wrist itself is the first sign. It's a red flag. But
yes.
So tell me about your experience. I mean, it's unimaginable. But I know of so many friends of mine who've gone through this, and yes. So tell me.
I think the worst part of all of this was walking home after I told him. And by the time I walked home, my parents had already got the call that this is what your daughter has done. This is what our son has now tried to do. And how dare your daughter say this to him? She is going to marry him. He's very upset. He's just tried to kill himself. I think that for me, the worst part was walking back into the house and my parents straight away ignoring my voice, shutting it down, not even saying, why don't you want to marry him? If you don't want to marry him, why would we force you to marry? There was none of that conversation. There was nothing that would say, this is our daughter. We need to think about her.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. My God, my heart bleeds, Jess.
There was nothing there. There was just, how dare you do this? How dare you even call him to your school? How dare you say anything to him? So it's all about him, nothing about, this is actually our child, this is our daughter. We need to, have a conversation with her about what she said and why she said it, and then think about actually why are they themselves forcing me to marry somebody that I have already to his face said, I don't want to marry you. I mean, there's so many aspects of this to be explored, because as a person who is engaged to someone, no one at any point said to me, do you want to marry this guy? Even he did not ask me, do you want to marry me? And for any person to be told to their face, I do not want to marry you, I do not want to be with you, I'm very sorry, and they still carry on, obviously something needs to be there. Something is wrong with that person. Something is completely wrong. Why would you want to be with someone that does not want to be with you?
It's a huge red flag.
It's a huge red flag. And the thing is, you are denying yourself true love, because the person that you're forcing to be with you is not going to love you.
Yes.
They're not going to, and I didn't. And my first husband would say, I love you. And then he would say, oh, but I know that you don't love me. And I would have to pretend, oh, no, I do mean it when I say I love you. But obviously I didn't, because how could I? So it's like you're fooling yourself and you're being fooled. There's so many things here to explore about, you're not going to be happy, are you? Because how can someone who is unhappy make someone else happy? and you
Yes.
just can't.
Oh, you can
You
say
know?
that again and again. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, and this is for every listener that you have. If someone tells you that they do not want to be with you, if someone tells you that they do not want to marry you, move on, get over it. You will find someone else. By being with someone who does not want to be with you, you are actually denying yourself true love or, peace of mind, because that person is not going to want to be with you. They will resent you in the end.
Yes.
Yes. Sorry. That's a
No,
bit of
no.
a rant.
Yeah, no. It's amazing because, it helps us understand because, people here, we have such a rosy, so many people have this whole rosy idea about living a life, in England and in America and in Canada and in Australia. And there's so many of us who go in for, of course, have a career. But the gory tales behind acceptance about this whole confusion between the white culture and the browns. And, I mean, it's amazing when you tell me this. So how did you even get out? I mean, the divorce, your parents must have been extremely angry when you decided to leave your first marriage.
Yes, I actually, with both of my marriages, actually, I did not leave. I ended the marriage, but both of them and this is a drama that men do. Not all men do this, but my two husbands did this. When you are basically saying the marriage is over and you are the mother and you have been the main carer for the children, the way that my two husbands behaved, because I was so stoic in I'm not going to give this marriage another chance. You go and do whatever you want to go and do. Both of them thought that if they left the house, that it was going to trigger something, that I was going to be like, oh my God, I can't pay the mortgage, come back. Or, oh my gosh, the kids need you, come back. So although I decided to end the marriage, both of them actually decided. My first husband left in a huff of anger after being caught with another girl. But he left in a puff of anger, thinking that I was going to come running after him.
How did you deal with
Immediately changed the locks the very same day.
What?
I immediately changed the locks the very same day. Literally within like 4 hours later, I had changed the locks. That's how stoic I am. So, and then with my second husband, I didn't change the locks, but he had dropped his keys on the kitchen cabinet and said, you need space to think, so I'm going to leave you alone. I'll come back when you're ready to give the marriage another try. I told him, not going to give the marriage another try. He left. And then obviously I said, no, definitely not going to give the marriage another try. And he said, oh, I'll move back in. I'm like, why am I going to let you move back in now that I'm divorcing you? Absolutely no way. So both of them, by their own hands, left, even though I left the marriage, if that makes sense.
It makes so much sense. So just tell me, do you think that the second time around when you got married, was it because you wanted to just get over? Because so many of us get so cornered, with the social pressure around us. And, we just think that we need a man to complete us. We need a man to complete us. And it takes us so many years to actually realize that, women are completely full in themselves. And it, by the time you're, probably so old and wise and you don't like any one of them anymore, Yeah.
I know. You just get so tired, don't you, really, of all of it. I think for me, and this is something that I think I will be producing more information on, what happened after my first divorce was, one, I was severely depressed. I think I had been suffering from depression for many, many years. Starting at 16.
Oh, God.
I was severely depressed. I'm a very serious, solemn person anyway. Unless I'm playing a prank on someone, I'm quite serious as a person. But I think for me, I made the mistake of moving back in with my parents, and I had my daughter as well. And my parents, basically, they didn't want me to get divorced.
Most parents don't want in India. Indian parents don't want their children to divorce. They want them to continue to stay in the same crap forever. Yeah.
Exactly. So it was like, my dad used to say that if you divorce, everyone else, all the other girls are going to divorce after you, because, he used to say, oh, really good, is going to go off the track. I mean, go off the track, everyone else is going to follow. So what happened was my parents didn't want me to get divorced. So I moved back in with them. It wasn't a good situation. And then as I was going through the divorce, I met someone, was my second husband, who was a narcissist. And with a narcissist, what they will do is they will become what you want them to become at that particular time to hook you in. And and this is how I explain it to women. In my work, what I say to women is, if you are going through a divorce, even afterwards, for many, for 2, 3, 4 years, for God's sake, do not have another boyfriend, a partner, whatever. I'm not saying live like a nun, but you do not need to get into another relationship. Firstly, if you're going through a divorce, if you're in another relationship, financially, that will impact on the settlement that you get. And also, because we come out of a marriage and we're so relieved, and I describe it to women as this. So we've all seen those wildlife programs where the wildebeest are trying to cross the crocodile-filled river. So they're so relieved to get across the river and not get eaten by a crocodile that they don't notice that there's a lion waiting to pounce in the bushes on the other side. The lion pounces, and that is where the most damage is done, because you think you're not vulnerable, but actually you are vulnerable. And here's the thing, the guy that is sitting across from you, taking you to dinner and treating you like a princess, he's going to become the exact opposite of your ex. And you might say, well, how does he know what my ex was like? Well, you're sitting across the table telling him all your woes and terrible things that your ex did. So he's going to be sitting there nodding his head very sympathetically and going, oh my gosh, I would never cheat on you. I've only had 2 girlfriends. I know I'm now in my 30s, but I've only had 2 girlfriends. I love my mother. I treat women with respect. Because you're giving him the information, he's going to deliberately give you back what he thinks that you're going to want to hear, whatever it is to hook you in. So he becomes the opposite of your ex-husband, which is why I say to women that you should not date, you should not try to get into another relationship until you have, gone past your divorce many years.
You need to heal. You're so right when you say this. You need to heal, because that whole awareness that comes in, I think, after a failed relationship, and something which is so socially bound in Indian marriages, we don't just marry the man. You get married to the entire family, the society, the culture, the entire, jing bang along with it. So you're so right when you say that you need to reach that level of healing for you to recognize that, no, this is not what I want and this is what I want. And many of us get so pressurized, to immediately jump into something because you try and find solace, another man again, and another, like you said, the lion which is waiting on the opposite side.
In this country, statistically, second marriages fail more. So that's why if you get remarried, you're more likely to end up having another divorce. And I think it is because a lot of people just get married very quickly. For me, my reasons were, I think, my parents and that situation. My daughter, I wanted to give her a father figure, and this narcissist, my second husband, narcissist,
oh my God, I can imagine.
He was very loving towards her in the beginning. And you're vulnerable, but you don't think that you are. You're relishing in this new freedom, but what you don't see is, again, that lion that's in the bushes waiting to pounce. I think it is hard. I think as the whole Bollywood Disney princess,
yes, seriously,
that is so ingrained into each of us. We all want that happy ending. When you've been through trauma, you're just looking for somebody else to help you get that happy ending. And then you have someone that is promising you all sorts of things. And you're thinking, because we don't live with someone. As Indians, we don't really live with someone before we marry them. So we don't.
No, you don't get to know them at all.
A chance
absolutely.
to see.
You
don't get to know them at all. It's very difficult. You just don't get to know them at all how you should before you commit. And the next thing you know, you're in a second marriage, and it's not going good. It's probably going to crash and burn worse than the first marriage. And the other thing is, when you get divorced, your children are so impacted. Your children need your energy, not you dating someone. And trust me, I am speaking from personal experience, having made the mistakes that I do not wish on even my worst enemies. Your children are the ones that need your focus. They need your attention. One, the trauma of the divorce and the actual practicalities of going through divorce, but also the emotional toil it takes on you. You don't have, if you have another relationship with a man, where are you going to get that space to give your children the love and the support, that the extra love and support that they need at the time when you're separating from their father, who they may love very much. So, it's traumatic. So that's why I advise women, don't go into another relationship for so many reasons, Don't live like a nun. I'm not saying live like a nun, but I'm just saying don't tie yourself with someone. Don't give, you only have so much energy. It needs to be on sorting out your divorce so you get a good financial settlement, and also preserving your energy so your children are less traumatized. You need to be there for your children. You need to be present for your children as much as you can. Because I read a study recently that said it doesn't matter what age your children are when you divorce, they are always going to be traumatized, whether they're 2 years old, 12, 22, 32, 42, whatever it is, whatever age they are. Children are always traumatized to some level when their parents divorce. So the younger the child, the more chance. Yeah.
You're a brave heart, and your story is going to reach out to so many people. Of course, we also had a discussion. You spoke about attempted rape by a family member, and which is again something that constantly happens in homes, and children, and girls don't have the guts to talk about this because they always feel that they're at fault for a man having made a pass at them. So tell me, I mean, the trauma that you faced when you were with an incident like this that happened in your life.
I think there's two incidents. One was an uncle that was touching us. He was actually touching my sister, and then I came up with a plan that actually, when he came round, I would do the tea instead of her, but she would stay in the kitchen with me. And then he touched me, and that was the first time he touched me, but it was also the last time he did it, because I went and told my mum straight away. And I remember my sister trying to stop me, and I'm like, why? We have not done anything wrong. And I don't feel shame because of stuff like this that happens. And I've never felt shame about it because I haven't done anything wrong. So why would I feel shame? I have done other things wrong for which I feel complete shame, and I'm totally ashamed of myself. But for these sort of things where you have been molested and someone's tried to rape you, why would I feel shame? I never do. And I think that's why I've been able to voice. The second incident that happened was actually my father-in-law in my first marriage. And that completely destroyed my first husband and any chance that we would have had at having a marriage that lasted. He tried to rape me.
Your
I pushed him off.
father-in-law?
Yeah, my father-in-law. And I told straight away, there's no one else in the house. And I managed to escape and run upstairs and lock myself into my bedroom. But I told straight away, as soon as I saw my husband, because he was the first person back into the house, I told him straight away. And it was dealt with in that everybody knew. He was told off. I still had to live with him because,
Oh God, and how did you manage that, Jess? My God,
you
because
learn.
you got to, in Indian homes, the father-in-law is like, and the mother-in-law is so exalted, and they're like, you would be seen as somebody who's a bad, is a bad person, not a good girl, because that's something we're all fed. Good girl, you need to be a good girl, a good wife, a good daughter, a blah blah blah. And how did you deal with living in the same house with your father-in-law who tried to rape you? I mean, I'm short of words actually here, Jess.
I look back now and I think, how did I do it? And I think, again, it is you learn to cope. I think for me, the fact that everyone believed me straight away. No one questioned me. the questioning only came after I wanted to separate from my first husband. But at the time, everyone, and even today, everyone accepts what happened because he had a history of it. He had a history of it, even with his own daughter, with other female relatives. So he had a history of it. So I wasn't ever made to feel that I was telling a lie or that I shouldn't be supported.
He was an abusive person. My God, Jess.
He was a
He's
very
an abuser.
Yeah, he was very abusive. He was physically violent as well. I say he never hit me. He did hit me in retaliation for me telling. He managed to get me into a room where I had a coping mechanism. So what I would do is, as soon as I could see that everyone else was leaving a room, like they were all going, like someone's going to work, someone's going into the kitchen or whatever, and I was going to be left in a room with him, I would leave that room straight away. I had trained myself to have like so many eyes always be on alert to leave the room so that I wasn't ever left alone with him. But one time he caught me out just shortly after the incident, and he stopped me he blocked the doorway and he smacked me. He basically said, "I told you not to tell." And he smacked me with his fist straight across like the side of my head, just above my ear. And I managed to push him off and I ran. And that was I think that was the only time. And I didn't tell anyone about that, actually. The funny thing is I did not tell anyone about that. And I don't know why I didn't. To this day, someone says, "Why didn't you tell that he hit you?" I think I just wanted to be left alone. I just wanted.
Because, you start doubting your own self, Jess. You start doubting. I mean, as a woman, we're all the time doubting when we are abused. We always think that it's our fault and we've done something wrong because, just the control that people have over us is. So I can imagine as to why you didn't tell others. I mean, I relate to it.
Yeah, because you don't want to be like the one that's always causing the problems. Like,
yes.
First he touched you, and we all supported you. Now you're saying that he hit you. And the thing is, what do you expect? I think for me, it's like, what did I expect my husband or anyone else to do? He owned the house that we lived in. He owned the place where my husband worked. All that sort of stuff goes through your head. And also, when you're suffering from depression, and you're forced to be with someone, you're forced to be in a house with all these people, you're already suffering. You're already just about able to put one foot in front of the other and get through the day. And then you have to cope with situations where, what's the solution? The solution for me in the end was that we moved out and we got our own house. Which ironically was one of the reasons that I could change the locks, because here's the thing: if you're living with your in-laws and you have an issue with your husband, you cannot lock him out because his parents are not going to let you lock him out. They're not going to let you change the locks. So in that respect, me moving out with my husband and getting our own property was actually one of the routes that I had to ultimately get my freedom, because I was able to lock him out. That was my house. My name was on the deeds. So there's so many different. I mean, we could talk about this all day, couldn't we? Really, how it is for women living in that situation. But I tell you, I completely sympathize with victims who have been abused, because you live with that fear, that stress level. The minute you walk back into your home, that stress is there. You learn to live with it. It's very difficult, though. It's very, very difficult. No woman should be living with that amount of stress caused by another person at all. Life is too short.
Tell me a little bit about your books, Jess, the writer in you. Because I just do believe that, for a writer, there's a saying that says that you become naked, near the public. And, you are, because the minute it's a no holds barred writing that you do that people relate to. And I think a good writer is an honest writer. So tell me about your books.
Okay, so when I I never actually had a plan to write. I wanted to be a journalist when I was younger, and that obviously didn't happen because I was forced to get married instead. My One of my best friends actually said to me, he said, "I think you need to write about what you've been through." And I said, "Why would I want to write about what I've been through?" And he said, "It's because you can help other women." And that's actually what prompted me to write. So there's 5 books in total, and each book covers. So the first book is from 0 to 16. The second book is 16 to 19. And then the third book is 19 to, I think it's going to end at like 28. And then you've got the fourth book and the fifth book. And I actually wanted to, from the very first word that I wrote, I knew that if I was going to write, I was going to write without fear, without, you still worry because you don't want to hurt people's feelings.
Yes.
But then you have to write without fear, because otherwise you are constantly monitoring yourself. You're changing stuff. You're changing the reality of what happened. And here's the thing, the reality is ugly. It's very ugly. And I think, but the reality is also not just what's happened to me, but it's happening in millions of homes and nobody's talking about it because we're so good at pretending. We're so good, especially women, we cover our husband's mistakes. We cover, what the mother-in-law said to us this morning, which was horrible. We by the afternoon, we have to put a happy face on and turn up with her at a family celebration and pretend that everything's fine, but the hurt is still there. So for me,
we don't address our hurt. We don't.
We don't, because
yes, we don't.
What can you do? You have an argument with her. Are you going to win the argument? Is there even a solution to the argument? It's just, when you look at family and you look at family dynamics and you look at relationships in general, they are so complicated. They take up so much energy. And I think sometimes that's why I advocate women to be single. I myself was single for 7 years. Trust me, I did not live like a nun, but I was single for 7 years before I met my current boyfriend. But I think relationships take up a lot of energy. And what I wanted to actually do in the books was, I didn't want to just write a book about blah, blah, blah. This is when I was born. This is where I went to school, and make it very boring. So what I've done is I've taken a chapter of, a scene, an incident that's happened, and I've made a chapter out of it. But at the end of every chapter, there is a second part that comes talking to my therapist about what happened. So, for example, one of the chapters in Spare Burden is where my mother was beaten up by my grandfather and my father with a rolling pin because she was speaking to her male neighbor. So I do that as a scene, as the chapter. And then the second part of that chapter is me talking to my therapist about why she was beaten up. So it's analyzing it, it's reflecting on it. Why do women get beaten up more than men? So it's that, and every chapter is written like that. Every chapter is in 2 parts. So everything is analyzed so that women can start to reflect on their own reactions and actions to things that have happened to them, and actually question, why did they do something or why didn't they do something?
What's your relationship like now, Jazz, with your parents?
Well, my dad passed away in 2016. And before he passed away, he actually helped me with some of the earlier chapters in the first book. My mother, I have a very strange relationship with my mother. I don't really like talking to her when she calls me. She lives in Vancouver now. I'm not sure whether to pick up the phone or not. And 8 times out of 10, I will not pick up the phone to my mother, because every time I do pick up the phone, she starts telling me how to live my life. She starts telling me how to be with my children. And it's just constantly, there's no love there. There's no understanding there. There's just constant trying to control. And so I don't like, it usually ends up in an argument. So I just don't like talking to her. So, but I have a very close relationship with my grandmother. My mom's mom. So I have a very close
Your
relationship
nani.
with, yeah, my nanny. I have a very close relationship with her. And I have a lot of good friends and other family that I still talk to. But I have done away with toxic relationships. And here's the thing, even though you have in your big extended family, there are people that you don't talk to. When you get invited to a social event and the person is there, you still have to say, hello, how are you? And that's it. You just move away. Some people I just will ignore, even when they say hello, because of things that they've done. Even if they say hello, I may say hello back and then just say nothing else, or I may just even ignore them. But you try not to make a scene because it's not your event. It's, you're there for someone else. It's their day. You just got to be a grown up about it and just understand that it's not about you. It's not about your issues or what someone else has done to you. There's no revenge there to be had. It's just something that you have to do, because we all have relatives that we don't
absolutely abhor. And we just
relatives that have
absolutely
actually done stuff to us. So
yeah, absolutely. You can say that again and again. I mean, I faced so much of rejection from the extended in-laws in my own marriage because I'm from a different community, and it really did take a toll on my own self-confidence, for really long. And I never knew why I wasn't being accepted. And now after 24 years of marriage, I just don't give a rat's ass about it, and I'm all right. I mean, whether you like me or leave me doesn't matter to me anymore. But yes, when I was younger, I pined to be accepted. I pined to be loved and cared for, and to be included. And I think also in a way I'm really glad, because it made me very stoic. I was in a new city and I was doing things by myself, and I found my own support group in the city that was outside my husband's family, and that really, really also helped me blossom into the human being that I am today. So I think every struggle comes with a certain amount of win, and so I actually don't I quite am glad that I've gone through the struggles that I've gone through in life, because it's made me who I am. Yeah, to an extent I think so. Some of them at that time, it may seem like it's really, really crazy and it's bad, but on hindsight you realize how much more stronger you are. I don't think your books would have happened just if you had not gone through the things. Of course it isn't good when you're going through it, but there are so many more people who are going to benefit from reading and being associated with the new work that you want to do about finance and women how they should be totally free in their head if after the divorce, and how they can they're not to look immediately for another man, and also start looking within themselves, because that's something I think so many women miss out on. And it's fabulous. I think you would have not been able to do all of this, Jazz, without all that you've faced. Don't you agree?
I agree to an extent. Obviously, I think sometimes I do look at my life and I think about the things that have gone wrong that are still wrong, if that makes sense. And most of it is to do with my children. And that, the aftermath of the second divorce and how it affected the children, that still is affecting the children to this day. So
have you spoken to them about it?
Sorry?
Have you spoken to them about it?
No, they don't want to speak about it. So I think that is an effect that is still having, it's still there. So I think for me, there is at the moment I'm working towards a happy ending. I'm working towards I think I'm content as a person now. I'm very content. I'm very happy in the world that I've created. I can go days without having to speak to anyone. I'm not I think when you're confident in yourself, when you are comfortable with your own company, when you can look at the world that you have, whether you're rich or you're poor, and you can feel that sense of contentment, I think that's when you're actually really happy. And I think and I was just talking just last week to a friend of mine, and I said, all the things I've gone through, I said, my children and the relationship that I have with them now, which is not a good one. I'm estranged from both of my children, and that is heartbreaking for me. I said, other than that, I said, I'm pretty okay with everything else that's happened, that's gone, you know, that what I have at the moment. I'm happy with everything else. It's just that part. And unfortunately, that part is huge. You know,
it's
there's
huge,
children.
yes.
It's
Yeah.
huge. And I think until that rights itself, and that can only happen through time, maybe months, maybe probably years, there's you know, it's a work in progress, right?
You're
it's a work
all
in progress.
work
And
in progress, Jazz.
yeah, and I think the books will help with that, because I do plan to explore my relationship with the children and how it went wrong and where it went wrong, so that other women don't make the same mistakes. And I also do support men as well who also are estranged from their children, because although my focus is mainly on helping women, I do get men who come for help, and they usually it's for the children, because the ex-wife is denying them access to the children. And I'm not a supporter of that at all. I don't support, you know, if any woman comes to me and she wants help with her finances, one of the questions that will come up is the children, if she has children. And I don't support any woman that tries to keep her children away from their father. I'm not a supporter of that. And I have said to women, unless you change this aspect of what you think is going to happen, they're not just your children, they're his as well. But unless you change, I don't really think I can work with you, because I don't want to work with women that are using children as porn.
Yes, absolutely.
You know?
That's one of the worst things to do.
It's about fairness.
Yes, it is about
in
fairness. Yeah. So thank you so much, Just, for being on today's episode. So just to, by the time I close this session, I can go on and on and on talking to you. So there isn't much that Jazz has not seen or experienced when it comes to family life and relationships. So you can check out her books on Amazon. She's been born and raised in the West Midlands in the 1980s with her 5 sisters. So Jazz rebelled from a very young age. You can hear that through her stories against male dominance and patriarchy. And that's why she's also on my podcast. And both within her family and outside, she followed a forced marriage, and which also made her come out with her book. Jazz began to write her No Holds Barred book series, Life Out of Reach. The series has been written without fear or hesitation, which is a sign of a very good writer, providing a window into the depths of depravity and male supremacy that exists not just within a wider society, but also inside the Sikh Punjab culture and religion among the immigrants in the UK and in India. Thank you so much, Jazz, for being on today's episode. I am honored.
Thank you for having me.
I'm honored to have you, and I look forward to meeting you whenever I travel down to London or you come down to India. It's been amazing.
I would love to host you anytime you're coming.
I would love to
England,
host
let me know,
you
please.
too. Absolutely. So, Jazz, thank you so much.